All right, welcome everybody to Digital SAT Grammar Rules. This is Mr. Tui. I'm the creator of the SAT Crash Course series. And we've got a student with us today. This is Melanie. Say hi to everybody, please, Melanie.
Hi.
All right. Thanks, Melanie. Appreciate it. And so today we're going to go over all of the rules you need to know for the digital SAT, the grammar rules you need to know for the English section, the verbal section of the digital SAT. This also applies to the digital PSAT. I know, Melanie, you're actually taking the digital PSAT like tomorrow, right? So this is
Yes.
just in time. We're sneaking this in here just in time. So if you are a student taking the SAT, anytime basically from beginning in the spring of 2024 on, this is the grammar rules video you need to watch. This is it right here. Now, if you're taking the SAT fall of 2023, it's a little different story. The old grammar rules apply. There's just a few more of them on the old paper version of the test. But if you're taking the digital test, this is the one you want. There's fewer rules. I think on my last grammar rules for the old SAT and PSAT, I had like 10 grammar rules. Here I've only got 6 grammar rules. That's all we need. So it's fewer rules, but they get into a little bit more detail on some of the rules, especially punctuation. So let's just jump right into it. You've got the document in front of you, Melanie. Here's the plan. We're going to read these rules together. If you have questions about anything, don't hesitate to ask those questions. I'll clarify everything right now. But this is every single grammar rule you need to know for that digital SAT and digital PSAT. Let's start and read rule number 1 together. Punctuation. Go ahead and read that first bullet point for us, please.
Periods. Break up to separate stand-alone statements.
Yeah, do you know what I
Is
mean when I
commas-
say, standalone? Do you know what that means when I say standalone statements?
I think so, yeah. Like,
I mean, it's like a
separate
complete,
ideas.
yeah, separate ideas, but like a complete sentence. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
A complete sentence. Most students are pretty comfortable with periods, like just make sure the thought stands by itself. Like it doesn't like have to be finished. We'll see some examples of standalone thoughts here coming up here in just a moment on the comma rule, actually. Does that make sense? But you know how to use a period, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
okay. Most students are pretty comfortable with that. But I just want to clarify that's it. It's for separate standalone statements. So interestingly, you can use a semicolon also on standalone statements or complete thoughts. We'll talk about the semicolon here in just a minute, but we should be good on periods. Go ahead and read that comma rule, please. That first bullet point.
Okay. Use commas whenever you need a brief pause. If you don't need a brief pause, leave it out.
Okay, so
Commas
I'm going to stop you for just a minute. So I could really complicate commas, and a lot of like grammar textbooks complicate them a lot. You don't need to. Here's the question you need to ask yourself, Melanie, and anybody watching this recording. If you need a brief pause in the sentence at that point, then you need a comma. If you don't need a brief pause, then you don't need a comma, and that's it. So just ask yourself, do I need a brief pause there? And if you can kind of read through that statement without like taking a break at all, then the comma shouldn't be there. But if you need that pause, you probably need to have a comma. All right, go ahead and read the next part of the comma rule. It says commas should not be used.
Okay, commas should not be used to connect two standalone thoughts. There, a period or a semicolon might be used.
Okay, great. And then I want you to read that incorrect example there of the comma.
Okay, incorrect. I went to a store. I bought all the items I needed to bake cookies.
Okay, so Melanie, there we've got 2 standalone thoughts there in that incorrect version. Look at the first half where it says, I went to the store. Okay? Does it make sense why that's a standalone thought? Why that could stand by itself as a sentence? Like you could put a period there after the word store, and that would be a complete sentence.
Yes.
I went to the store. But the second half also stands alone. You could say, I bought all the items I needed to bake cookies. That also stands alone. So in that incorrect example, you've got 2 standalone thoughts separated by a comma, and that's no good. Does that make sense, Melanie?
It does.
Okay, good. Read the correct version.
I went to the store. I bought all the items I needed to bake cookies.
Okay, great. Yeah, you got to use a period there, right? If it's 2 standalone thoughts. Or a semicolon would work as well. Again, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's read the next part of the comma rule. It says avoid using commas. I want you to read that for us, please.
Avoid using commas when identifying something or someone by its full title.
Okay, and then read that incorrect version there.
Incorrect. A Spanish painter, Pablo Picasso, is my favorite artist.
Okay, I love that you took the pauses there, right? Because the commas are right there, surrounding the name Pablo Picasso. But that's actually incorrect because the full title of this guy here is Spanish painter Pablo Picasso. Does that make sense why that's sort of the title of this painter? Does that make
Yes.
sense? Spanish painter Pablo Picasso. And so
Yeah, I know him.
this is kind of a new thing that they're testing on the digital SAT. I've seen lots of questions like this. The full title of something, you don't need those commas sort of surrounding, breaking up the title. I want you to read the correct version for me. Just be careful here to take no pauses. Just read right through it.
Okay, correct. Spanish painter Pablo Picasso is my favorite artist.
There you go. How does that sound?
It sounds way better.
Yeah, it does
Way
sound better,
better.
right? Yeah. A lot of students want to put the positive, but there's no need to. I know it's kind of a mouthful because it's a long title. But if you see big titles like that, just when in doubt, leave it out. I haven't seen it a correct version yet where you're breaking up the name of the title. So be on the lookout for those questions and just get rid of those commas if it's a title. Make sense?
It does.
Okay, great. There's one more part of the comma rule. It says use commas after parentheses. I want you to read that for us, please.
Okay, use commas after parentheses if, when you cut out the parentheses, the commas is still needed.
Okay. And then go ahead and read that correct example. I think this is going to make sense here.
Correct. Although the last global conflict was World War II, there have been countless regional wars ever since.
Yeah, that's correct. Now, I mean, some students might read the dates, right? And they'd read it like, although the last global conflict was World War II, 1939 to 1945, there have been countless regional wars ever since. You kind of cut that out. And by the way, that's okay. You never really need to read the stuff in parentheses, or rarely need to read the stuff in parentheses on the SAT. That's like, it's never directly related to the main point of the sentence. It's always like additional information, right? Like, we don't need to know, that World War II was 1939 to 1945. It's just additional clarifying information. But here's the deal. You might see some questions or some answer choices where there's no comma or there's a comma after the parentheses. And it's like, do I need a comma there? Do I not need it? If you cut out the stuff in parentheses like you did, and you still need a pause there, then you need the comma after the parentheses. Does that make some sense? You can say no if it doesn't.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and the way you read it, right, you took the pause after World War II. You need that pause there. You can't just blast through it. So if you need the pause after you take out the stuff with parentheses, then you need the comma after the parentheses. Questions about that, or are we good there?
No.
Okay.
Everything perfect.
Great. It's real specific, but I've seen these questions like this all throughout the digital SAT and digital PSAT practice tests. They're coming out. Yeah. So know those specific use cases of the comma. Let's go to semicolons. Go and read that bullet point for semicolons, please.
Okay, semicolons connect two related statements that could still stand on their own as completed sentences.
Okay. And then read that correct example, please.
I went to the store. I bought all the items I needed to bake cookies.
Yeah, and I think I've got the exact same example roughly for the periods, right? And
yes,
because they're both for standalone thoughts. Yeah, so if you have two standalone thoughts, you can use a semicolon there. You never really have to use a semicolon. You could always put a period there as well. But sometimes authors want to highlight the relationship between two standalone thoughts. And so you can kind of highlight the relationship a little bit more with a semicolon than you would with a period. So, but they're easy to test, right? Just check and make sure that you have two standalone thoughts there separated by that semicolon. If you do, then you can use a semicolon there. And if you don't have two standalone thoughts, then you can't. Questions about that, or are we good?
Are we good?
Okay. Now, this is funky. I've seen this a lot on the new digital SAT. This is a really uncommon use of the semicolon. Most students have never done this before in their entire lives, even if they use semicolons, in the first correct example, with standalone thoughts. But read that second part. It says also use the semicolons for lists.
Also use the semicolons for a list of items that have commas within each item.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
I took a tour for state capitals, including Austin, Texas, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So notice we've got two semicolons there in that sentence, and they're clearly not standalone thoughts, right? Little Rock, Arkansas is not a standalone thought, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana is clearly not a standalone thought. But why can you use a semicolon there? Well, we've got a list of 3 items here. That is 3 state capitals. Okay. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but do you know that, like, if you're talking about like a city in a particular state, like Austin, Texas, right? There's a comma after Austin. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. Like we're talking about like Miami, Florida, right? So Miami, Florida. So that's Austin, Texas is one thing. It's not 2 different things. It's Austin, Texas. That's one thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have a list of items that have commas within each item, which you do here, then you need to separate those items with a semicolon.
It's like needed, like you
have
right?
to, yeah, because if it was a comma after Texas, for example, and a comma after Arkansas, you'd read it like this. I took a tour of state capitals, including Austin, Texas, Little Rock, Arkansas, Baton Rouge, and Louisiana. Texas isn't a capital,
it doesn't sound good.
right? Doesn't sound good. Texas isn't a capital. It's not a city. Arkansas isn't a capital. It's not a city. Those are states. Louisiana is not a capital. It's a city. So that's why you need the semicolon there to clarify that. Now we're talking about 3 items here. There's just commas in between in the middle of each individual item. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does.
It's really funky. And like nobody ever, I've never done this. Like I would just completely rearrange the sentence so I wouldn't have to mess with this if I were writing it. But it pops up on the digital SAT and the digital PSAT. So be aware of it. Okay, look out for lists of items that have commas in each item, as is the case.
Okay.
Questions?
No.
Okay.
Perfect.
But most of the time, it's just make sure you're using a semicolon to separate standalone thoughts, and unless it's that second use case, that's the main one that applies. Let's go to colons. That's the next bullet point on the next page. Go ahead and read that colon rule for us, please.
Colon. Introduce an explanation, description, or a list, even at least one item. Even a list of one item. It would appear in this order. First, thing to be explained, described, listed. Second, the colon. Third, explanation, description, and list.
Okay, I'm going to stop real quick because this is a very versatile punctuation mark, and most students aren't super familiar with the colon. Like Melanie, have you ever used a colon in like an essay or like in your own writing? Do you ever use it or no?
No.
Yeah, most students don't.
Never.
But they're great. They're great. I use them all the time now. So they introduce an explanation, a description, or a list. Okay, you can do any one of those 3 things. And maybe half the time you'll see it introducing a list. Okay, but to use it properly, you've got to use it in the sort of 1, 2, 3 formula that I have here. There's going to be the thing to be listed or explained or described, then the colon, and then the explanation or description or list. Okay, does that make some sense? Okay, read that correct example. I think this is going to make more sense. In fact, I've got 2 correct examples here. I'm going to read that first.
Correct. I went to the store to buy a few items: butter, flour, sugar, eggs, and chocolate chips.
Okay, great. Notice that correct example, Melanie, follows that 1, 2, 3 formula, right? There's the thing to be listed, right? A few items. I went to the store to buy a few items. So we're going to list the few items, right? Then the colon, and then the list of the items. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. It even sounds good, too. I mean, you take a little pause after a few items, but like, okay, that works, right? It could be a list of one item as well as be where they could say, I went to the store to buy the only thing I needed to bake chocolate chip cookies, chocolate chips. Okay, that's a thing, too. It could just be one item, but that's fine. You could have like a grocery list with one item. But it still follows that 1, 2, 3 formula. Does that make some sense?
Okay. It does.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Read that second correct example. I think this is a colon as introducing a description here.
I was baking chocolate chip cookies, my favorite kind of treat.
Okay, good. No, so that's not a list here, right? This is just a description of chocolate chip cookies. Okay, but notice once again, it follows that 1, 2, 3 formula. It's chocolate chip cookies, and then the colon, and then the description of chocolate chip cookies, my favorite kind of treat. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does.
Okay, great. So, I recommend really going through some of the digital SAT practice tests and practicing applying these rules. But just, when you see a question that involves a colon, just check and see if it follows that 1, 2, 3 formula. If it follows the formula, you can use it. If it doesn't, you can't use it there. That's that simple. It takes a little practice, again, if you're not super familiar with it, but with a little bit of practice, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. Any questions, or we ready to move on?
No.
Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the M dash. The M dash. Go ahead and read that M dash rule.
The M dash, a single M dash, can be used anywhere a colon can be used, following the rule above.
Okay, so Melanie, if you understand the colon rule, then you understand the M dash rule as well, because a single M dash can be used anywhere a single colon can be used. Okay, so all the other 2 examples with the colons, we could plug in a single M dash there in those examples, and that would work as well. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. A single M dash and a single colon are completely interchangeable. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Good. There is one difference. We'll talk about what that is in just a minute. There's a double M dash. We'll get to that. But go ahead and read the correct example of the single M
Okay,
dash.
correct. I was baking chocolate chip cookies, my favorite kind of bread.
Okay, yeah, and see that's exactly the same structure basically as the colon example right above it, but completely interchangeable there, right? Anywhere you can use a colon, you can also use an M dash. That's for a list or an explanation or a description of something. Notice it also follows that 1, 2, 3 formula, right? Just like the colon does. Yeah, chocolate chip cookies, then the M dash, then the description of chocolate chip cookies. Okay. Now there is one difference between the M dash and the colon. Go ahead and read the next part of that rule. However, for a list, go ahead and read that part.
However, for a list, description, or explanation in the middle of a sentence, use the double M dash.
Okay, and read the correct example for us.
Correct. All of the creative elements of a film, casting, acting, cinematography, effects, and editing are the responsibility of the director.
Yeah, so this is a little bit different from the colon. There's no double colon, okay? But there is a double M dash, and that's for lists or explanations or descriptions in the middle of a sentence. And that's what we see here in this correct example, right? There's looks like a list of all of the creative elements of a film. Do you see that? And then you see
Yes, I see.
the 5 creative elements of a film. But notice you're kind of interrupting the idea there with that list, right? And then they kind of finish the thought after that. And so if you're kind of, if it's a list or explanation or description in the middle of the sentence or interrupting an idea, you've got to use the double M dash there. Okay. Technically, you could also use a parentheses there. They just don't test on parentheses a whole lot on the SAT or the digital SAT. But they do test on that M dash and that double M dash quite a bit. So be aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. You could also.
So double.
Yeah, go ahead.
So double M dash is for like separating in the same sentence?
Yes. It's if the list or the description or the explanation is in the middle of the sentence, then use the double M dash to sort of separate that list or that explanation, that description.
Okay.
Okay. You could also sort of rearrange that sentence and end the sentence with a single M dash or single colon. So I could say like, the director is responsible for all of the creative elements of a film, single M dash or single colon, casting, acting, cinematography, effects, and editing. But there, I'm ending the sentence with the list, which is why I don't need the double M dash in that example. Does that make sense? Where I'm not interrupting the sentence with the list in that example I just gave you. Does that make some sense?
It does.
Yeah, but here I am, which is why you need the double M dash. Okay. Questions?
No.
Okay. That's it for, oh, no, we got one more. They test on the question mark. Yeah, we do have one more. Yeah. Go ahead and read that rule on the question mark for us, please, Melanie.
Use the question mark only when asking a specific question.
Okay.
Incorrect.
Yeah,
He wondered if the garden survived the drought.
Yeah, the drought. Do you know what a drought is, Melanie?
No.
Yeah, drought's like when it doesn't rain. It doesn't rain at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he wondered if the garden survived the drought. Now notice that's the incorrect example here. Okay. When I would read that, I'd probably say if you try to ask that or say that as a question, it sounds really weird. He wondered if the garden survived the drought. That's like, I can see there's kind of a question there, but not it's not really asking a specific question. It's really more of a statement. Right? There should be a period there. You could say, he wondered if the garden survived the drought. It's not really a specific question. What's that?
It's like more like a thought.
Yeah, it's a statement, right? There's no question there. He wondered if the garden survived the drought. He wondered what he should eat that day, right? That's a statement, not a question. He wondered what to wear. Does that make sense why that's not a question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, you're just saying he wondered something. Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, it is funny, right? Yeah. He asked if he could leave the class. But that's not a question. You're just saying he asked if he could leave the class. Right? That's different from like, can I leave the class? Okay, that's a question. Right?
Yes.
Go and read the correct example here. This is an actual question.
Correct. Did the garden survive the drought?
Yes. Okay, great. Did the garden survive the drought? Is it clear why that's a question?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right. So just make sure you're asking a specific question and it's not making a statement like that first incorrect example is. Questions about that?
No, perfect.
Okay, great. That's it for punctuation, essentially. It gets real specific sometimes, but again, you really need to practice these practice tests. Just go and do a Google search for digital SAT practice tests. You'll find them and start practicing applying these rules. It's going to help a ton. Okay. Go ahead and read, let's go to the second rule on possessives and read that first bullet point for us, please.
Yeah. Pay attention to the placement of the apostrophe. to determine if a word in possession is singular or plural.
Okay, yeah, read that example of the singular possessive for us,
Okay.
please.
Singular, that is the girl's sweater.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you real quick. So, you know what a possessive is, right? I mean, like someone or something possesses, or is in possession of something. Okay, in this singular example, right? There's a girl in possession of a sweater. A girl has a sweater. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's the sweater of the girl. So now we know we're talking about one girl here because the apostrophe signifies possession. The apostrophe. See, it's kind of like a comma that's lifted up. It's right next to the L in girl. Yeah. And so whatever comes before that apostrophe is the thing in possession. In this case, it's the girl that's in possession. Okay? If the apostrophe were after the S in girls, that would be multiple girls in possession of a sweater. Okay? Because it would be the girls in possession. But here it's just the girl. Okay? Now it's tricky because it sounds the same as the plural possessive, right? If the apostrophe were after the S, you'd read it the exact same way. You'd say, that is the girl's sweater. It sounds the exact same. But if you're trying to determine whether a possessive is singular or plural, just pay attention to the placement of the apostrophe. If it's singular, it's going to be before the S. If it's plural, it's going to be after the S. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great. And then read the plural example of the possessive there.
The boys' favorite game is football.
Perfect. And we're talking about multiple boys here, right? Plural. And we know that because the apostrophe is after the S. What's tricky, again, is that would sound the exact same way as the singular possessive, right? If we had the apostrophe after the Y, it would sound the exact same way. You'd say the boys' favorite game is football. Sounds the same, but just pay attention to the placement of the apostrophe to determine if your possessive word is singular or plural. Does that make some sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. Go and read the next bullet point for us, please, Melanie.
Pay attention to commonly confused possessive with no apostrophes.
Okay.
It versus its, short for it is.
Yeah, okay. So this is tricky. This is tricky. I'm going to stop you real quick. So there are three possessive words, three possessive pronouns that don't have apostrophes. Okay, it's there and your. Those are the ones in bold, underlined there under that bullet point. It's there and your. They're possessive. And it's tricky because there's also contraction forms of those words. So it's with an apostrophe is a contraction that's short for the two words it is. It is. Okay? Do you know what a contraction is? Have you heard that before or maybe not?
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. So if you see it's with an apostrophe, like we see there in those examples, that's short for it is. It is. Okay? You've just basically smushed those words together, taken out the I, and placed an apostrophe in place of the I. It's called a contraction. Okay. I've got some examples here of it's, the two different forms of it's. I want you to read those examples. I'll explain the difference between these two forms.
The dog ate its food versus it's going to rain.
Okay. Now, so let's look at the dog example. The dog ate its food. Okay, that's the correct use of the word it's there. It's possessive, right? We're talking about the food of the dog, right? The dog ate its food. Okay. But there's no apostrophe there. Do you see that? There's no apostrophe there.
Yes.
Because if we had the apostrophe form of it's, that stands for it is. Okay, look at the it's going to rain example. That's the it's with an apostrophe. Read that example again for us, please.
It's going to rain.
Yeah, okay. So we could break that form of it's up into two different words, right? Because it's with an apostrophe stands for it is. Yes. We could read that as it is going to rain. Okay, it is going to rain. Does that make sense, by the way, if we say it is going to rain? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. But if we had it's with an apostrophe in the dog sentence, we'd read it as the dog ate it is food.
And it sounds weird.
And that sounds really weird because that's not what it means, right? The it's is the possessive pronoun that we need there. It's not a contraction for it is. Okay? So if it's a possessive pronoun, like it's there or your, the possessive form does not have an apostrophe. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, let's go to rule number 3, make it match. Go and read that first bullet point for us, please.
Okay. Subject-verb agreement. Find the subject of the sentence, identify if the subject is singular or plural, and pick the matching singular or plural verb in the answer choices.
Okay, so this is a subject-verb agreement here. This means basically, Melanie, if you have a singular subject, you need a singular verb. And if you have a plural subject, you need a plural verb. Okay? I'm going to show you here how to find the difference between singular and plural verbs here in just a moment. Look at that example of a question I've got below here. Okay, I want you to read that example for us, please.
Okay. A pack of wild wolves roaming through the neighborhood.
Yeah, a pack of wild wolves blank roaming through the neighborhood. Okay. Now, this is interesting here. Do you think you know what the right answer is here? Would you say is, are, were, or have been? Do you have any idea here?
A pack of wild wolves, maybe they have been roaming.
Yeah. That's a little tempting here, right? Because what is the subject of the sentence? Do you know what the subject is?
No.
Yeah. A lot of students, I'd say most students, read the sentence and they think the subject is the wolves. The wolves.
Okay.
But this is funky because the subject of the sentence isn't the wolves, it's a pack. A pack is the subject. Okay? Now, what kind of pack is it? Well, it's a pack of wild wolves. But how many packs are we talking about here, Melanie? How many packs?
A lot.
No. Well, we're talking about a lot of wolves. But it says
but only one pack.
One pack. It says a pack. Yeah, if we're talking about more than one pack, it would be many packs of wild wolves. Okay, that would be plural. But when the sentence says a pack of wild wolves, that's one pack. Does that make sense? Why that's singular?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's tricky, right?
Yes.
Because like if you saw the word team, like the team takes the field, some students think the word team is plural, right? Because they're like, well, it's made up of a bunch of people. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's made up of a bunch of people, but it's one team, right? Teams with an S would be plural. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah. Or like, I know you would never do this, but like, if someone went to a gas station and bought a pack of cigarettes, well, how many packs are we talking about? Well, if it's a pack of cigarettes, we're talking about one pack, right? Now it's got like a bunch of cigarettes in it. That's fine. But it's one pack. So that would be singular. Does that make sense?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Now.
And it's tricky. Now, here's the deal. This phrase of wild wolves, that's called a prepositional phrase. And that's describing the subject, okay? But the subject is never going to be inside that prepositional phrase. A pack of wild wolves, the subject is roaming through the neighborhood, the subject is pack. Or if you said a pack of cigarettes costs $5, the subject isn't cigarettes, the subject is pack. Does that make sense?
It's pack.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Good. All right. So the key here is if it's a subject-verb agreement question, find the subject. Find out if the subject is singular or plural, right? And we know now that this is a singular subject. And then we've got to pick the matching singular verb in the answer choices, okay? Now, even if you identified right off the bat that pack was the subject and pack was singular, it's still not obvious which of the answer choices are singular. Would you agree with that? That's not obvious just looking at them, like which one's singular?
Yeah, it's
not clear at all, right? So here's how you test them. And I can explain it here below, but I'll describe it right now. If you need a singular subject, test the answer choices with the singular pronoun it. It. Does it make sense why it is singular, by the way? Is that clear? We're talking about
yes.
it is my favorite flavor of ice cream. We're talking about one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
So test them with it. So can you say, we're going to test answer choice A to start. Can you say it is? Is that acceptable? It is.
It is?
Yeah, is that acceptable? Like it is my favorite color.
Yes.
Can you say, yeah, that's fine. Can you say it are?
It are?
Yeah.
I think it sounds weird, no?
It sounds very weird. Yeah, you can't do that. Can you say it were?
It were.
Yeah.
I think it sounds better, but it still sounds weird.
It still sounds weird. It should. Yeah, there are a couple exceptions. The subjunctive, I guess. You speak Spanish, right, Melanie? You speak Spanish?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you might be familiar with the subjunctive. There is a subjunctive for me, but I've never seen that tested on the SAT. It should sound weird when you say it were.
Okay.
So that's were is plural. I'll get to that in just a minute. Can you say it have been?
It have been?
Yeah.
I think you said it, but it still sounds weird for me.
Yeah, it should sound weird. Yeah, it's not quite right. You can say it has been. It has been. It has been my favorite team. You could say that. But you wouldn't say it have been. And that's because B, C, and D are plural. And the only one that's singular is A.
It's A, right?
It is sounds the best. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, so now if you needed a plural, then you test the answer choices with they. They, that's a plural pronoun. Can you say they is, Melanie?
No.
No,
Totally no.
No. Can you say they are?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Can you say they were?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you say they have been?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great, because those last three are plural. Does that make sense, how you can use those pronouns it and they to determine if a verb is singular or plural?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It makes a lot of sense.
Good. So let's step back for a minute and kind of talk about the process here. They like testing on these subject-verb agreement questions. If you see 4 verbs in an answer, in the answer choices, I can almost guarantee, there's like a 90% chance, we'll say, they're testing on subject-verb agreement. They could be testing on tense as well. Sometimes they do. We might see some of those come up here in a minute. But most of the time, they're testing on subject-verb agreement. So just find the subject, find out if the subject is singular or plural. If you need singular, test the verbs with it. If you need plural, test the verbs with they. Any questions about that?
No, perfect.
Okay. One more trick to these questions. Even if you struggle to find the subject in a sentence, but you know you're being tested on subject-verb agreement. Okay, you see the 4 verbs in the answer choices, and they're testing on whether the subject is singular or plural. If you see 1 singular answer choice and 3 that are plural, I can pretty much guarantee the right answer is going to be the 1 singular. Does that make sense? Why, Melanie?
Yes.
Yeah, because if the subject is plural, they're probably not going to give you 3 plural answer choices. That could be right.
Exactly.
Right? Or if they give you 1 plural and 3 singulars, I can pretty much guarantee, right? It's going to be the 1 plural. Yeah, right? So that's just a little test-taking strategy there, kind of a trick that works. If you can identify you're being tested on make it match subject-verb agreement. Questions about that, or does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
Okay. I mean, it's a process, right? You got to practice the process. You can see why practicing applying these rules would be so useful. There's like one thing knowing what the rule is, but like another thing is making your habit is thinking about these questions this way. So you got to practice, but it doesn't take a whole lot of practice, and you can get a good score increase just by knowing what the rules are if you put it in work. So, okay, good. Let's go to make it match pronouns. Go and read that bullet point for us, please.
Pronouns refer to a person or thing mentioned elsewhere in the sentence or passage. Make sure you use a singular pronoun like it when referring to a singular subject, and a plural pronoun like they when referring to a plural subject.
Okay. Does that make some sense? We were talking about why it is singular and why they is plural, right? So
yes.
If the subject is singular, you can refer to it as it. If it's plural, refer to it as they, or refer to them as they, I should say. Go ahead and read that example there with the blank. You can just read it as a blank. Yeah.
If people exercise regular, blank will dramatically improve their health.
Yeah. Do you think you know the right answer here?
Give me a second. They.
It's they. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And if we plug it in, it should sound good. If people exercise regularly, they will dramatically improve their health. But clearly, we're referring to like the subject here, which is people.
Plural.
Yeah, and that's plural, right? So you got to have the plural there, right? It wouldn't work. You technically could be singular or plural, so could we potentially, but we notice at the end of that sentence we're using the possessive pronoun their health, right? Yeah, right. So we also have to match that. So that's why we know we're referring to they as well. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, but you couldn't say it there because people is plural. So, questions about that?
No.
Okay, great. Let's go to make it match tense. Go and read that bullet point for us, please.
Tense. If events are happening in the present, use the present tense. If events happened in the past, use the past tense. If they will happen in the future, use the future tense.
And that may seem like common sense, but like that's it. Like, just pay attention to when the events are happening in the sentence and then match, whatever tense you need to be in. So read the correct example here.
Correct. The band played in its hit tune and the audience erupted in applause.
Okay. Does that make sense why we know, we're talking about events that happened in the past tense, the band played its hit tune. Yeah, so then just, match that tense. You wouldn't say the band played its hit tune and the audience will erupt in applause. That doesn't make any sense, right?
It sounds weird.
Yeah, it shouldn't sound very weird. So just ask yourself, okay, when are the events happening? That's it. Now, it's possible, you can have, different tenses in the same sentence. You can. It just depends, when the events are happening, for the particular underlined portion in the sentence. And if it's happened in the past, stay in the past. Happen in the present, use the present. If it's happening in the future, use the future tense. That's it. Okay?
Okay.
All right, let's read the next bullet point on parallel structure.
Parallel structure. Look for patterns in sentence structure and stick with the pattern.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you real quick, Melody. Do you know what parallel means? Like, we're talking about 2 parallel lines. Do you know what that means?
Yes, like math, like geometry parallel lines, following like a sentence, I think it was.
Yeah, like 2 parallel lines, they've got the same slope, basically, and they could go on forever and never intersect because they're so closely aligned, in their slope. Does that make some sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So parallel structure means basically like a matching structure in the sentence. We've got to align the structure in the sentence. So go ahead and read the correct example. I think it's going to make sense by looking at the example.
Okay, correct. Along with running and rock climbing, surfing is one of my favorite activities.
Okay. So notice you've got that ing ending there in all those examples. Do you see that? Running, rock climbing,
Yes.
and surfing. You wouldn't say, along with running and rock climbing, to surf is one of my favorite activities, right? That should sound a little bit weird. So you've got that ing ending and all those other words. Just whatever the pattern is, stick with the pattern. Don't change it.
Okay.
So look out for patterns, then match the pattern if you see a pattern. That's parallel structure. Does that make some sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, rule number 4 is one of my favorites here. Misplaced modifiers. I'm guessing you've never heard of misplaced modifiers before. Have you heard of that, or maybe you have? No, you
not
haven't.
at all.
So a modifier is just a modifying or a descriptive phrase, right? It's a phrase in a sentence that's describing something in the sentence. So a misplaced modifier is just like a descriptive phrase that's in the wrong part of the sentence. Okay, it's in the wrong part of the sentence. Okay, and I'll show you where kind of how you need to arrange it. Go read that first bullet point. I think this will make sense when we look at the examples.
The modifying descriptive phrase must always come immediately before or immediately after the word if it is modified.
Okay, and read that incorrect example there.
Blazing through the night sky for brief periods of time, humans have long been fascinated by comets.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melanie. So there's a descriptive phrase there in that sentence, Melanie. It's the underlined portion, okay, where it says blazing through the night sky for brief periods of time. Okay, so someone or something is blazing through the night sky for brief periods of time. Is that clear, Melanie?
Yes.
Okay. Now, here's the deal. That descriptive phrase needs to come immediately before or immediately after the word it's modifying or describing. Okay. Now, what word follows this description? What word?
Comets?
Well, it should be comets. It should be. Right?
Humans.
But in the incorrect example, right? It's humans. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that sentence is suggesting that humans are blazing through the night sky for brief periods of time. And that's why it's incorrect.
Okay.
Does that make sense why that's wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's tricky because a lot of students read that sentence, they're like, okay, it makes sense to me, it's fine, right? They're like, oh, they're probably talking about the comets, right? And like our brains are great, we can kind of fill in the gaps and like figure stuff out, you know? But still be aware that sentence structure is suggesting that humans are blazing through the night sky for brief periods of time, and that's why it's wrong. Read the correct example. It's going to make more sense. I think it'll sound better too.
Blazing through the night sky for brief periods of time, comets have long fascinated humans.
Okay, do you see the difference there between the correct and the incorrect version there?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Does the second one sound a little bit better to you?
Yes, it does sound better.
Yeah. And it's tough to catch, right? It's really tough to catch because did you think the incorrect sounded bad? Maybe not. A lot of students don't.
No.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. You're like, okay, they're talking about the comets. Come on, you know. But be aware, a descriptive phrase needs to come immediately before or immediately after the word it's describing. Okay.
Okay.
So if you see some answer choices, and there's no like grammar issue in the answer choices, like they're not testing on the verb form or like punctuation or anything like that. And it's like, but I don't see anything wrong with any of these answer choices. It could be like an ideas issue or a structure issue of the sentence. So that's when you need to be on the lookout for that misplaced modifiers rule. They like testing on it on the digital SAT. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay,
everything's
great.
perfect.
Okay, great. Let's go to rule number 5. This is transition words, and there's like a whole toward the end of the verbal section of the digital SAT. They've got like 4 or 5 questions just on transition words. So we really have to know this. They can be tough, but once you know the relationships, it's all going to make sense. Go ahead and read that first part of the transition words rule for us, please.
For transition words questions, identify the two separate ideas being connected. Identify the relationship between the two ideas and choose the corresponding transition word.
Okay, and there's an example there right below that. So here's the key. First of all, you'll know you're being tested on these transition words because you look at the answer choices, you'll see a bunch of different transition words in the answer choices, like however, because, after, also, right? Furthermore, likewise, although, however, right? Could be, you'll get familiar with these here as we practice them. So identify the two ideas being related here. That's where you need to start. So the first idea here in this example is, I normally get good grades. Usually I get good grades. Does that idea make some sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second idea here is, this semester I failed my chemistry class. So normally you get good grades. And then this semester I failed my chemistry class. So what's the relationship there between those two ideas? Do you see the relationship?
Like they're talking about a school, maybe?
Well, they're definitely talking about school. Yeah. But there's 5 main relationships. I want to preview those real quick. Let's take a look at those below the question example there. Look at the 5 major transition word relationships.
Yes.
So look at the first relationship is similarity. 2 similar things. Okay? And then I've got some examples of similarity transition words. Furthermore, likewise, moreover, alternatively, also, and. Okay? Read that first example for similarity.
Example, I like eating cookies. Also, I like eating ice cream.
Okay, that's a similarity relationship because those are 2 things that I like to eat. Okay? So 2 similar things, right? Any of those other similarity transition words would work there instead of also, right? I could say, I like eating cookies. Furthermore, I like eating ice cream. I like eating cookies. Likewise, I like eating ice cream. I like eating cookies. More, I like eating ice cream, right? Because those are all, it's a similarity relationship. A similarity transition word will work just fine there. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it does.
Let's look at contrast, right? And there's some examples of contrast transition words. Although, however, nevertheless, but, despite, still. Read the example there for contrast.
I worked all the day in a project. However, I wasn't able to complete it.
Yeah. Is that clear why those are 2 contrasting ideas there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like you're contrasting the first idea, maybe?
Yeah. Like I worked all day on the project, right? You'd think like it would be done, hopefully, right? I worked all day on the project. However, I wasn't able to complete it. Okay, kind of 2 contrast, right? Something surprising or unusual about those 2 ideas being next to each other. It's probably a contrast relationship. Does that make some sense? Okay. Let me give you another example to make it real clear. I could say like, I had a bad case of the flu. However, I still started in the basketball game. Okay, those are contrasting ideas, right? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah, you read that, you're like, wait, you had the flu, and then you started in the basketball game with the flu, right? Like, if there's something surprising or unusual about those 2 ideas being next to each other, it's probably a contrast relationship. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to cause and effect. So some examples of cause and effect transition words would be because, therefore, thus, so, consequently, as a result. Go and read the example.
I got a bad case of the flu. Therefore, I was not able to attend the class.
Good. Okay, so this is kind of similar to the other example I gave you, the contrast, but this one makes more sense as cause and effect because the first idea is I got a bad case of the flu. And because of that, therefore, because I had a bad case of the flu, I wasn't able to attend class. So if the first thing is causing the second thing, it's a cause and effect relationship. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. The contrast example I gave you about the flu, right? I mean, I could also say, I got a bad case of the flu, therefore I did not start in the basketball game. That would be a cause and effect relationship, not contrast. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of similar sentences, but depending on the transition word you use, it determines the relationship. So, okay, let's look at the 4th relationship. That's for providing examples. Some common phrases would be, for example, for instance, in fact, and indeed. Go and read the example there.
I love playing sports. For example, I play football, basketball, tennis, and soccer.
Does that make sense? Well, that's a providing examples relationship there.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I love playing sports. There's sort of a general category and then examples in that category. That's pretty straightforward. And it could also be a relationship of sequence, right? Like the order in which things happen. I've got some examples there: before, after, then, later, first, second, third. Whatever. Go and read the example, please.
I bought everything I needed to bake cookies. Then I baked them.
Yeah, do you see why that relates to sequence? That's a sequence relationship.
Yes.
First, you did this thing first, and then later, right, you baked them. So those are the 5 main relationships. So let's go back to the example there of I normally get good grades. So that's the first idea. I normally get good grades. And then the second idea is this semester I failed my chemistry class. Do you see the relationship there between those 2 ideas? Is that similarity or contrast or cause and effect or providing examples or sequence?
They're contrasting.
Definitely contrasting, right? Like normally you get good grades, right? But in this case, there's sort of an exception. This semester I failed my chemistry class. So we need a contrast transition word. There's only one contrast transition word here. Do you see which one it is?
However.
Definitely. Absolutely. Plug that into the sentence. I want to hear it. It should sound good.
I normally get good grades. However, this semester I failed my chemistry class.
Okay, great. How does that sound to you?
Good.
Good, yeah, it should sound good, right? And then it makes sense because it's a contrast relationship. So go through that process. Find the 2 ideas being related, and then find the relationship between those 2 ideas, and then pick the matching transition word. So it would be worth kind of studying those 5 relationships, before your PSAT you're taking tomorrow. I know, but read through, study this rules document. Study it, yeah, and just think in terms of these rules when you're taking that test, and it's going to help you a ton. But know the 5 relationships. Okay. All right, and then the last rule number 6. Go ahead and read that for us, please.
Rule number 6. Trust your ear and trust your instincts, right?
Yep.
You may not always know the exact rule that applies. So when in doubt, trust your ear and go with your first instinct. You may be wrong some of the time, but it is always your best bet.
Okay, so if you're reading the question and you know the rule you're being tested on, you're like, oh, come on, they're testing me on, subject-verb agreement, or they're testing me on like punctuation here. Great, apply the rule. Think in terms of the rules. That's great. But if you're not sure what rule you're being tested on for a particular question, just go with what sounds good. Listen to, trust your ear, trust your instincts. Go with your first instinct, by the way. Be like, can't explain why, but that one sounds the best. That feels the best. Go with that one if you don't know the rule. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so practice listening to your instincts, especially if you're in doubt or if you're like kind of torn between two answer choices. Sometimes be like, oh, I'm not sure if it's that one or that one. Go with whatever your first instinct is. Okay, your instincts aren't perfect, but if you're betting on it, your best bet is your first instinct. So go with that. Let's practice applying these rules now on some of the questions here on a digital SAT practice test. You should have that in front of you. Now, the first questions on the digital SAT verbal section are going to be on like reading comprehension and vocabulary. But kind of like right smack dab in the middle of the verbal section, they start giving you some of these grammar questions. So we're going to start right in the middle of this practice test. This is digital SAT practice test number 1. And we're going to start with question number 19. We're going to practice applying some of these rules. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to read these paragraphs here. And instead of reading like blank, where there's a blank, Melanie, I want you to plug in answer choice A right off the bat. Okay? And then we'll see how that sounds. That'll save us some time. Okay? So read that and plug in answer choice A.
Public awareness campaigns about the need to reduce single-use plastics can be successful, says researcher Kim Barr of Monash University in Australia. When these campaigns give consumers a choice. For example, Japan achieved a 40% reduction in plastic bag use after cashiers were instructed to ask customers whether they wanted a bag.
Okay, great. How does answer choice A sound to you, Melanie? How does it sound?
It sounds good.
It sounds pretty good. Okay, do you know what rule we're being tested on here, Melanie, or no?
I think the plural and singular?
Yeah, definitely, right? And now do we need a plural or do we need a singular here?
The plural.
Yeah, we definitely need a plural here, right? Because who wants a bag? Who wants a bag here?
The customers.
The customers. We definitely need a plural. So, and is they plural, by the way?
Yes,
absolutely. So that could work. Let's keep it. Plug in answer choice B. I just want to hear it. And you can just take it from for example.
40% reduction in plastic bag use after cashiers were instructed to ask customers whether one wanted a bag.
How does that sound to you?
Weird.
That sounds really weird, right? Yeah, you don't even have to know the rule here, right? If it sounds weird, it's probably not right. So just be aware of that. But A is looking really good. Do you think C is going to work?
No.
I don't think so either, right? I don't think we have to play. What about D? Is that going to work?
No.
No. Now, when you do this test, I really do recommend reading the sentence and plug in the answer choices. Kind of, going through all of them. Because ideally, you can confirm the right one and get rid of all the wrong ones. Ideally. Then you can be really confident about your answer choice. You should have the time to do it as well. In the digital SAT, they do give you more time per question than the old version of the test. So I do recommend kind of plugging them all in. But for the sake of time right now, I think it's pretty clear. It's answer choice A. Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and that's it. The rule here is let's make it match pronouns here. We just need that plural pronoun they to match customers. Great job there. Let's try number 20. We'll practice a few more of these.
Number 20. In ancient Greece, an Epicurean was a follower of Epicurus, a philosopher who beliefs revolved around the pursuit of pleasure. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul. I read the answer?
Yeah, plug in answer choice A. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Trouble in the soul, posting that all life's virtues derived from the absence.
Okay.
From this absence.
Okay, good. So clearly they're testing us on punctuation here. Is that obvious?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I like you took a pause after the word soul there for answer choice A, right? Because there's a comma there after soul. How did that sound to you? You may not have like a handle on like all the big ideas in the paragraph here, but how did it sound to you?
It kind of sounded weird, though.
Yeah, what sounded weird about it?
Like separating like the comma,
Yeah.
Because it's like two different ideas.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, I tell you, let's plug in answer choice B, and there's a colon there, so we'll test that colon rule here in just a minute. Take it from Epicurus.
Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul. Posting that all life's virtue derived from this absence.
Okay. So notice we've got the colon there in that answer choice. Do you have any idea whether this is correct use of the colon or not?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Is this correct use, do you think?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. When do we use a colon? When do we use a colon?
When you're describing a list, like after a list or something.
Yeah, it could be a list, but it could also be an explanation or description of something. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if we have an explanation or description, it's clearly not a list, but if we have an explanation or description of the absence of pain in the body and trouble in the soul, then we're good. Is this an explanation or description of the absence of pain in the body and trouble in the soul?
No.
No, it is not. So we can't use the colon there. Does that make some sense?
Yes.
Okay, that's easy to get rid of. It just doesn't follow the formula. Try answer choice C, and just take it from Epicurus.
Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence.
Okay, now what punctuation mark is that in answer choice C? What is that?
Semicolon.
Yeah, and when do we use a semicolon, Melanie?
To separate two different, like, similar ideas, I think so it was.
Well, let's go back to the rule real quick. Let's go back to the rule.
So, okay, I read it.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
Connect two related statements that could still stand on their own and as completed sentences.
Yeah, that's how we need to test it, right? If we're going to go with C, we've got to make sure these two parts of the sentence stand alone as complete thoughts or as complete sentences. Okay? So here's what I recommend doing. I recommend reading both parts and just kind of hearing if they stand alone. Okay? So read the first half. Take it from Epicurus to soul. Let's see if that stands alone.
Number 2?
Yeah, we're still plugging in C, but I want to hear just the first half from Epicurus to soul.
Okay. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul.
Okay. Does that stand alone?
Yes.
I think so. That sounds good. Let's read the second half.
Positing that all life virtues derived from this absence.
Does that stand alone?
Yes.
Ooh, I don't think it does. Positing that all life's virtues derive from this absence. Yeah, that doesn't stand alone. If you said he posited that all life's virtues derive from this absence, that would be fine. Or if it just said all life's virtues derive from this absence, that would stand alone. But that second half is really a descriptive phrase. Positing someone or something, right, it's Epicurus, is positing that all life's virtues derive from this absence. That's just a descriptive phrase that doesn't stand alone. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it does.
It's tricky, right? Like if I said like running from the bear, does that stand alone?
Yes.
No, it doesn't. If I said I ran from the bear, I ran from the bear, that would stand alone. Or if I said he ran from the bear, that would stand alone. But if I just said running from the bear, well, what about running from the bear? You know. It's like, okay, it's just not it doesn't stand alone. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's tricky to catch. You might need to practice a little bit the difference between standalone thoughts and those that aren't, sentences and fragments. But beware that second part doesn't stand alone. Let's try D.
Choose D. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence.
How does that sound?
Sounds kind of good, I think.
Okay. Now, hold on. We're using a period here in the sentence, right? We're using a period there. And we use periods to separate two standalone thoughts. Do we have two standalone thoughts here? We do not. We do not. And another reason you should be suspicious of both C and D is that basically they're pretty much the same thing, right? You're using a semicolon for standalone thoughts. You use a period for standalone thoughts. And if you see a semicolon and a period in the same part of an answer choice, I know like the semicolon is kind of like after the quotation marks and the period is before it. I get that. But if C is acceptable, so is D. If C is acceptable, so is D. And if D is acceptable, so is C. Because anywhere you can use a semicolon, you can also use a period. Does that make some sense? Why you can get rid of, if you see a semicolon in the same place as a period, then just get rid of those because they're not going to give you two right answers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So interestingly here, the right answer is A. Epicurus, I'm going to plug it in. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and trouble in the soul, positing that all life's virtues derive from this absence. All you need there is a brief pause. So the comma works. Yeah. But here's the big takeaway here for this question. Sometimes you read the right answer choice and you're like, I don't know about that one. Okay. If you're not sure about it, just keep it. The better path to finding the right answer is to get rid of the bad answer choices. That's the better path. Elimination. Okay. Sometimes you read the right answer and be like, it's probably that. Okay, if that's fine. But you really want to get rid of the obviously incorrect answer choices by applying the rules. Okay, so we can get rid of B, it doesn't follow the colon rule. We can get rid of C, it doesn't follow the semicolon rule. And D doesn't follow the period rule either. We don't have two separate standalone thoughts there. So even if you're unsure about A, if you can get rid of B, C, and D, you're going to pick the right answer here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's do one more. We're going to do one more here. Number 21.
Okay.
Plug in answer choice A right off the bat.
British scientists James Watson and Francis Crick won the Nobel Prize in the part of their 1953 paper announcing the double helix structure of DNA. But it is misleading to say that Watson and Crick discovered the double helix. Their findings were based on famous X-ray image of DNA fibers, photo 51, developed by X-ray crystallographer Rosalind Franklin and her graduated student Raymond Gosling.
Okay, great. I love that you read that as they are. I love it. I love it. And that's what you should do if you see they, there with an apostrophe. Read it as they are. How did answer choice A sound to you? Did that make sense in the sentence?
Their findings. I don't think it sounds good with findings. I don't know if it's me.
No. I agree. And especially if you break it into the two words. Remember, there with an apostrophe stands for they are. So would you say they are findings were based on a famous X-ray image? Would you say that?
No.
Probably not.
No.
That does not sound good. Plug in B. Now notice B is it's with an apostrophe, so you can read it as it is. So plug that in and as it is. Let's hear it.
Its findings were based on famous X-ray image of DNA fibers.
Okay, stop. How does that sound?
It is findings. I thought it sounds weird.
It should sound weird. You wouldn't say it is findings were based on. No. Try answer choice C. Plug it in.
Their findings were based on famous X-ray image of DNA fibers.
Okay, stop. How does that sound?
It sounds a little bit better than the others.
It does sound better. Yeah. Now, plug in D. Let's hear D. I would keep C, but we know it's not A and B.
Yes. Its findings were based on famous X-ray image of DNA fibers.
Okay, how does that sound?
I think I would go for C. I think D.
Yeah.
I have something with D.
I agree with you. C sounds better. I'll explain why here in just a moment. Now, notice, what's the difference between C and D here, Melanie? What's the difference?
That C is plural and D is using one of the rules.
Yeah, D is singular and C is plural. Now, whose findings are we talking about here? Whose findings?
The two guys that won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah. So is it going to be their or its findings?
There, because there are two.
It's plural. That's it. So it's C, and that's why it sounds better. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. But even if you're like, get rid of A and B at the very least, and then, if you have to guess between C and D, go with your gut instinct. And if you're getting rid of the obviously incorrect ones, then you're dramatically increasing your chances of finding the right answer. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, Melanie, unfortunately, that's all we got time for at the moment, but maybe I'll have some more videos coming out going over some of these questions, applying these rules. But at the very least, study that rules document, and good luck on that digital PSAT test you're taking tomorrow, okay?
Thank you.
Melanie, thank you so much for meeting with me. And those of you watching the recording, thank you so much. Make sure to like and subscribe and all that stuff, and be on the lookout for more digital SAT and digital PSAT videos coming out soon, okay? Thank you, Melanie.